on them, but also that might affect the angle of how much is sticking out, the sweatshirt. You decide. State's Exhibit 23, why is that important? Do you see any blood on his hands? On the victim's hands? State's Exhibit 24, do you see any blood on his hands? I mean, is there any dispute that the defendant's mouth, nose, had some blood on it? How come there isn't any blood on the victim's hands? Because the argument was made or suggested to you in terms of the cross-examination of the medical examiner and all that. Oh, you had to wash his hands, so that was inaccurate. You know, you all didn't know what you were doing there. Well, right there at the scene, where was the blood? The other interesting thing is that I would submit to you, just based on the evidence, I don't know what you call this, I don't know if it's a drawstring or what. Why is one of them a lot longer than the other one? Was the defendant maybe pulling on that as the victim was trying to back out? It's ironic that you see how one is pulled all the way down? And which side is it on? State's Exhibit 29 just shows some of the other exhibits out there. State's Exhibit 33, I put this in here because I thought, and we talked about it, I believe it came out during the testimony, that there's a street address right there. That's where the defendant claimed he didn't know the street name, or he couldn't find an address. Even though he's lived out there 4 years, he takes his dog out there, or dogs out there to walk, but he doesn't know that there's street addresses, because this isn't just like some fancy or just regular neighborhood that all the houses are different. These are kind of cookie cutter. They're all the same. But he didn't know there was addresses out there, so that's why he had to walk that long distance to find the address or find the street for the police to aid him. State Exhibit 36, those are just some daytime photographs kind of showing you the area in terms of what happened out there. State Exhibit 76, there's been a big issue about that photograph. It shows how the defendant was bleeding. I believe Mr. Manalo took that photograph. Why is the blood still on there, and why would the blood not be on the victim's hands? It's interesting, too, the direction of the blood, and we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of what happened. State Exhibit 77, this is again Mr. Manalo before the police got out there. Where are the victim's hands? But under his body? What did the defendant claim to you? He used police jargon in terms of suspect and, well, the police, of course, they always spread out the arms, the hands, to make sure there's no weapon there. Because he's trying to tell the police that what happens is he was scared, and he at one point said, oh, I thought he had something in his hand, so I was checking for that weapon. That's what I was doing. Well, it's inconsistent with the physical evidence out there. Now, defense may argue, hold on, didn't Dr. DeMaio say that you could take out a person's heart and then they could live for 15 seconds and that the person could kind of walk or do all this other stuff? Okay, so you take out the heart, then the defendant kind of moves him and spreads out his hands, and so he's taking even more blood pumping out, and he's able, and then the victim just kind of happens to just kind of lift himself up and put the hands underneath? I don't know. You decide. Why did he have to say that? Because it's part of him wanting to be a cop. And that's what police officers do. Even when they shoot somebody, they usually handcuff them. Even if the person is dead, I mean, they handcuff them just for security purposes. The other interesting thing is, you recall the flashlight the defendant had in terms of in relation to where the body was. And again, the photograph that I showed you, State's Exhibit 79, that was showing, I think, one or a few witnesses out there. And State's Exhibit 80. Those are the two photographs that were showing out there that was taken, I think, by Officer Wagner. Defendant's gun. You recall what we heard about that from an expert regarding DNA? Swab from the pistol grip matches the defendant. And Trayvon Martin is excluded. That is inconsistent with what the defendant claimed to Mr. Osterman. On him, but swab from the pistol grip matches the defendant. And Trayvon Martin is excluded. That is inconsistent with what the defendant claimed to Mr. Osterman. You had, he described what part of the gun he grabbed. And then there's other test results, not limited, and then no determination made on the other side. In the holster. You had also, I would submit, relevant the fingernail scrapings of the victim in this case. No DNA foreign to Trayvon Martin, no DNA results at all. So the victim in this struggle that the defendant claims he had with him when he was trying to kill him, basically, or shut him up so that he couldn't speak, where did all the blood go? Where did all the defendant's blood go? I would submit to you that's another lie. You saw that the hooded jacket was checked, and I'm just giving you very quickly the DNA results. You've got an exhibit there that's got them all in there. But just to demonstrate to you how thorough the investigation was in terms of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement doing their thorough analysis of the
If you're ready to take a break, we'll take a 15-minute recess, ladies and gentlemen.
The victim, Trayvon Martin, who was being followed by this man who had the right to defend himself. And you obviously know that he gave various interviews, and I want to just quickly highlight certain parts that I would submit to you are relevant as to establishing why this defendant is lying and why he was caught in numerous lies. And then obviously why it happened.
Wendy Dorval, Sergeant Perks, Officer Buchanan, and I'm the coordinator. And there's been a few times where I've seen a suspicious person in the neighborhood. We call the police, the non-emergency line, and these guys always get away.
Okay. What made them suspicious? Any tape or recordings of vehicles that come in and out of that neighborhood?
The last time they were down, the cameras
It
were
has
broken.
the ability, but
Why did I put that thing about the camera there? Because as you recall,
know the name of
Defendant's interview, that same day, part 2. What did he do there? He drew different areas, and it tracks in terms of where he was, where he claims he saw the victim, where the victim just came out of nowhere, where the victim was just kind of looking suspicious. You know the defendant that you saw. Defense made a big deal. Oh, he was washed up. Well, you've got this bloody photograph here. Claims defendant told the police that he was on his back the whole time and the victim was just wailing on him. Well, and you can look at the actual photograph. There's actually some grass on top, and it appears wet. Something to reflect all this tension with this concrete that occurred out there. How come it's missing? Of his head. You recall the testimony? There was 2. How small were they? You recall the testimony of the witness? You remember it. Why are his hands not injured? If this 17-year-old young man is wailing on him, how come he's not defending himself? You obviously heard this, so I just want to take you to take a second to read that. But he talks about these guys. He talks about not knowing these places. Again, yeah, he was serving in my car. As soon as man, you have a problem, and then punched me and fell to the ground. And then he's wailing on my head. And I yelled for and then, of course, this criminal put his hands over my mouth and said, "You're going to die tonight." I said, "Stay down, don't move." I got on top of him. He said, "Ow, ow." And then he talking about that he's telling. Then he talks about still not having seen the victim. He was struck in the nose. I screamed help. When he's talking, I would submit to you it doesn't, but again, you rely on what the evidence shows. Came out of the bushes. When I walked back toward him, meaning I was going towards where he was. And then he goes, "Oh," no, he was coming at me. Pardon my language, effing punk or asshole. Now he's the police term for this stuff. Hey, I wanted to be a police officer one day. Suspect this, suspect that, suspect that. Fired one shot into his torso. He's got all the language down. Beat him. Started beating him. Smothered by mouth and nose. Felt him slide his hand down. "You're going to die tonight, MF. You got me." I spread his hand. Let's talk about.
There's been a history of break-ins in that building, and I called previously about this house.
Right.
When the police arrived at this house, when I called the first time, the windows were open and the door was unlocked. And the police came and secured it. So I said, you know what, it's better to just call, and
Okay.
I kept driving. I passed him, and he kept staring at me and staring around, looking around to see who else was. I don't know why he was looking at me.
Did he walk off from there, or did he stop there last night?
He stopped, and he like looked around, and that's why
This is what he claims this criminal is doing.
Where was he standing at when you stopped?
right in front of 14.
On the sidewalk or in the grass?
In the grassy area.
Boy, that's a crime at RTL on Sunday night, February 26th. Standing out there in the grass.
Okay. And I went to the clubhouse
All right.
up here on the right-hand side.
taxi line, and when I got through, I parked at the clubhouse,
Alright.
and they asked me, where I was, and I told them the clubhouse, and I think I gave them the address of the clubhouse.
Where'd you park it?
Right up here next to that green truck. I don't think that truck was there, but I just pulled up.
Okay, so you just pulled in here,
Yes, sir.
and this is where you got out?
No. This is where I just stopped to call, and then he walked past me, and he kept looking at my car, and still looking around at the houses and stuff. So then the dispatcher said, where did he go? What direction did he go in? And I said, I don't know. I lost, because he cut down here and made a right. I guess it's Twin Trees Lane.
Did you catch that? For 17-year-old boy.
He made a right in there, and they said, well, what direction did he go in? And I said, I don't know, I can't see him. And they said, can you get to somewhere where you can see him? And I said, yeah, I can. So I backed out.
Alright.
Told you all in terms of where the victim was describing he kept yelling. That is, he claims the victim kept yelling. Of course, nobody else. Was you going to die tonight, motherfucker? No, you didn't. He knew the video cameras in terms of whether they were working or not. Explains it away, or tries to. He's getting right next to you and all. Oh, well, he didn't really circle the entire car. And he tries to explain why. Guy, it's not to go follow the victim, is it he just wants to catch the bad guy, the effing punk that gets away? Is that what? Again, you just heard it, so I'll just put it up there. Just other parts in the same interview. Mr. Osterman, his best friend, who wrote a book about this experience. Straddle means knees on the armpit and punching. Rear side flashlight and the hammer. Now, these are two individuals. That is Mr. Osterman, who is a trained federal. Thought he might try to get up again. At some point he goes, I wasn't sure whether he's dead, but then he holsters the gun. All right, let's talk about ill will. In terms of catching somebody, so he wants to get credit for it too. He doesn't want to be left. Make Trayvon Martin the criminal. And he couldn't find the address. Recall? Why does he have to lie about it? Common sense. How many arms did Trayvon Martin need? Activity can be packed into 70 seconds. That's what we're talking about. How is the defendant alive? Or is he exaggerating that to just... So the evidence agreed in terms of the physical evidence and the testimony. I will submit it does. In terms of the guilt of this defendant. You recall Mr. O'Brien? Second-degree murder. State's got to prove 3 elements. The victim, unfortunately, is dead. The death was caused by the criminal act of this defendant, and that there was an unlawful killing of Trayvon Martin by the act imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind without regard for human life. An act includes a series of related actions arising from and performed pursuant to a single design or purpose. It is an act of series of acts that a person of ordinary judgment would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious. Oh, he didn't have any. He was just a little upset. Why is he having? Intended to go and kill him. State is, the instructions that the court will read to you will tell you in part that and Hurricane Katrina, which has been proven, and there's a lesser included, and Hurricane Katrina wasn't just a thunder shower. In other words, your duty is, if you find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the highest the whole instruction to you. I just was. In terms of how you decide, and we talked briefly about that, it's to the evidence introduced and to it alone. Case must be decided only upon the evidence and the instructions. What the lawyers say is not evidence, and you are not even to consider it as such. You may not decide because you're biased or sympathy or angry at anyone or feel sorry for. Why do we have such rules? What if? That's not a lack of evidence. Could always be more. That's not reasonable. You will not hear, because a lawyer or Hollywood screenwriter can imagine something more than could be done, you must find the evidence lacking. What's not reasonable? Self-defense. is what the defendant applied to Virginia, hunt down fugitives, and you'll see the letters, emails, etc. Isn't that true? Again, the key point is that injuries really are not required if a person is legitimately in fear for their life. But why exaggerate them? Unless he's lying about the whole thing. Again, no DNA. Fingerprints also weren't on the gun. Blood wasn't there. Credibility. But should you believe the defendant? Does that make sense?